So I made a video last night about my current thinking on the COVID situation, and more or less that I believe that it is not as dangerous as we're being told. The message that it requires such a restrictive lockdown, that the dangers of it in terms of how it spreads and how the infection passes and the mortality rate and all those things, that it's being over dramatized to an extent. I don't think it's totally made up. I don't think it's totally fake or anything like that. I do think there is some risk, but from a very cold, pragmatic, objective view, if you break down the calculation, it comes out that the risk isn't worth what we're giving up. So I had that view, and I said in the video, and I believe I meant it when I said it, or at least I wanted to mean it, that I'm continuously trying to be objective in this, and I'm challenging myself, and my goal is to get to the objective truth. I'm not trying to prove that it's not that serious. I'm not trying to prove that it is that serious. I just want to prove the truth. And again, I believe that I want that to be true. I just can't be sure that it is true yet, right? As I watch back even the video from yesterday, I see it in myself. If I was trying to read it like I would read somebody else delivering a message, I could see it, that I am biased, perhaps just because I've made this decision, right? And now I just want to stick to it, and I want to be right, or whatever the reasoning is. I could see bias in there. I could see someone who really wants to be objective, but for me, if I think about what if it were all true? What if everything the liberal mainstream media was telling us, what if it was as dangerous as they thought? The risk of it was so high. The idea of not wearing masks, the idea of not following all the protocols, the idea of opening the schools again, thousands and thousands and thousands and maybe hundreds of thousands or even millions of people could die. What if that were all true? That's a hard thing to process. And I don't doubt that there is a part of me that almost wants to will it into existence that that's not true. If I, in a very irrational, almost childlike way, if I just kind of grunt and kind of muscle through it really hard, maybe I could make it be the way I want it to be. Maybe I could will that into existence. And perhaps that's led to part of my bias as well, because I so badly want it to be that it's not that serious and we can go back to normal, that all my mental resources are working towards that end, to try and give myself the peace of mind and the comfort that that is what's going to happen. And if I can do it in a seemingly analytical, rational, logical way, where I'm saying, I'm doing the things I say and being objective, well, then I can feel really comfortable. So there's definitely a motivation. There's a logic to me being biased and tending to lean more towards it's not that serious. And even what I just said, right? Imagine it were all true. Imagine everything the mainstream media was saying was accurate. If I think about that scenario, in the last video, I talked about how if it were all true, they would present it this certain way. They would make sure to build credibility. They would kind of have the foresight and the perspective to understand, like, hey, we need to convince people who might be skeptical that they would get it all right, was my assumption, if it were true. But that's a faulty assumption, right? If I really step back and think about that, it at least could be equally as possible that they are incompetent, or that they just don't understand the way to present it, or totally possible that I'm not as smart as I think I am, and my perspective that they should be presenting it that way actually isn't right. They know better than I do, and this way of presenting it, although it rubs some people the wrong way and it doesn't feel complete, it gets the message out wider, it gets adoption wider, it gets people following the protocols that will ultimately save lives. Totally possible. But I was working under the assumption, the way I built my cost-benefit analysis in the last video to come to the conclusion that it's not that serious, was built on that. It was built on the idea that they should do it the way that I thought, and I didn't even really question that. That just seemed obvious to me. So right there is an example of where I see this bias coming in, and I see it playing out in the actions in how I'm assessing this whole thing. how I'm looking at it, right? Because I want it to come out on the side of it's not that serious. This is something that we're going to be fine. We're going to be fine, right? And I see it throughout. I see it throughout the way that I'm assessing it, the way that I'm thinking about it. It's the same with what I spoke about in the last video of how they've jumped from, originally it was maybe it's not that serious to, well, you got to shut down for 2 weeks or 4 weeks or 4 months, and everybody's got to wear masks and everything's closed, and shut down the whole economy, putting rules in place to make sure there's not large gatherings, changing the way sports are played, perhaps forever. All of those things, the escalation to that, my assumption again was, well, that's too random. Like they clearly don't know what they're doing. They've been wrong so much and it's changed so much. And again, that was a big driver into me saying this can't be real, but there's an assumption in that as well, that if this random series of events happen and it well, not random, I shouldn't say that, but if this sequence of events happen and it led to these new decisions, that there has to be some deception there. I mean, again, perhaps there's incompetence. Perhaps it just happened to be the way that it worked out. They genuinely thought like this might get better and we will figure it out, and then they just kept changing on them. Perhaps again, they know better than me. And giving it in this phased way, rather than just saying up front, we're going to be shut down for 2 years, they knew it would be received better. Were they right or they wrong? I don't know. But the fact that I was assuming that because they didn't present it and the sequence didn't fall in the way that I thought it should, that likely means that there's deception here, or at least there's a decent enough chance of it, right? I kept talking about that it played into a cost-benefit analysis, and it should, because there is credence to what I said. But the bias that I speak of is me overweighting that. Me saying, since they didn't do that, really, I'm now taking the actions I'm taking. I don't think it's that serious. So you look at all this and you say, okay, I understand the logic I used at the time. I see the calculation, the cost benefit that I ran, but now it's almost the checking your work part, where you look at it and you say, well, there's some holes in this. If I was truly being objective and looking at this, I could pick this apart. Right? Again, it's not to say that it's wrong, but there's holes in it. And if the goal is to play it down the middle and be objective truth, find objective truth, there shouldn't be holes in it. So this type of activity, I guess, gets me to question that more. And again, it doesn't mean you blindly sway the other way. It just means at least now you have a better acceptance of the fact that you've truly questioned it. Perhaps still not as deep as I need to, but at least at some level, I've really tested this and I found some things that I may be off on. So now I can really check into those and see, what does it mean that I had a couple faulty assumptions here? Does that change everything? Or is there other evidence, right? Now there's the whole game that your mind will kick into where it's trying to perhaps protect itself and prove out that what I originally thought true is true. And I'll find answers to that. And you keep checking, and it's an ongoing battle of checking and checking, but I think it keeps me more honest. In a very practical perspective, and I guess I'll end on this, my gut reaction is that I will not change my behavior. I won't now, because I've found these flaws in my logic, all of a sudden lock everything down. I will explore it more and try and see, but I do think as I look forward to actions or activities that I might have taken, I might think twice on some of them. I might be slightly more cautious. It might lead to some different decisions, because I think I'm better weighting the cost-benefit analysis now. There's still plenty of doubt there. There's still plenty of reasons to believe perhaps this isn't as serious as I thought it was. But there's just not as many as there was yesterday. And I need to be realistic about that and factor that into it, and then bring the learnings on to future decisions and future things that I do. So yeah, thought it would be an interesting exercise to explore that in hopefully a true and honest way. And see where some of those holes were. So I'll be curious to see where I go from here on this.